Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Stephen Nelson, the Chairman of the Medical Examiners Commission. This is our quarterly meeting at the Sawgrass Marriott Resort and Beach Club here in Ponte Vedra Beach. It is Wednesday, August the 13th, 2008. I've been playing email tag with a member of the community, Ken Kramer, a researcher for Citizens Commission on Human Rights of Florida. You folks probably got very similar emails, perhaps, about our annual drug report. Mr. Kramer's concern is there are no annual Florida statistics on the number of anti-psychotic or antidepressant drugs, whether the cause of death are merely present. And despite the fact that these drugs, I'm quoting from Mr. Kramer's email to me, despite the fact that these drugs have black box warnings and life-threatening adverse effects, Mr. Kramer wants to know how he would go about to formally request that we include these two other classes of drugs so that the public has this information, or is that even possible? And I guess I'm presenting this to the group. Is this something that we want to add to our annual drug report of antipsychotics and antidepressant drugs? For our statistics. Start up here at the front group, Paul and some people. Dr. Hyma, what's your thoughts?
Well, we all collect the data. It would just be a matter of funneling it to branch. I'm not aware of the magnitude of the problem that Mr. Kramer refers to in his emails. Maybe he's looking at a different set of data, but or maybe our district is just different. That hasn't really been our experience with the antipsychotic drugs. They do occasionally, of course, cause death, but as far as getting the information out there on the report, it's just really a matter of funneling to branch if it's an issue.
Thoughts from the audience members? Larry,
I think when the Office of Drug Control first came to the Commission years ago and started this thing, their focus was really the street-level drugs and the illicit use of drugs, not so much the prescription drugs. And I know for a fact that Mr. Kramer is in an organization whose belief is that there should never be an antipsychotic drug used anywhere in the world. So he's got an agenda that may not be so apparent in requesting that this class be added to it. So
we can read between the lines.
Well, I've dealt with him in the past for years.
Does anybody have a handle on how big of a problem this is in anybody's particular office or statewide, district-wide for antipsychotic, antidepressant drugs? Yeah. Bruce?
I'm not going to address that question directly, but I've had some experience with Mr. Kramer as well.
Well, without getting personal with Mr. Kramer, more along the lines of the antipsychotics and the antidepressants.
Yeah. But I don't think he could capture the data that he wants to support their hypothesis simply by looking at data that the medical examiners could provide. That would be what drugs were found, were they present, or were they caused death. He needs a lot more information, at least in my opinion, to come to the conclusion that these drugs somehow played a role in their death through the mechanisms that they propose. And that group would have to, in addition to look at the autopsy report, they need access to medical records, investigative records, law enforcement records, everything you can imagine to essentially do a psych, post-mortem psych eval. So I think the offices could provide the data. We probably have to add about 25 more drugs to the list because it's antipsychotics and antidepressants, and there's probably at least a half dozen or more antipsychotics and probably at least 20 antidepressants that need to be listed. But I think the number alone could be very misleading.
I'm trying to get a handle on, does anybody think that antipsychotic and antidepressant drugs alone is that big of a problem with regard to overdoses to then raise it to the next level that then we start collecting it at the state level? Dr. Thogmartin, you had your hand up.
On every drug that I can remember that's that's on that sheet that we fill out, those are the drugs that the drug czar is interested in. I think if Mr. Kramer wants the sheet to be expanded, you ought to talk to the drug czar and convince him.
Well, it wouldn't require the drug czar to expand our catchment list. That's something the commission can do without.
Oh, I know that, but that's the approach I would recommend.
So it would be Dr. Schultz.
No, I just have a comment. I think for his purposes, honestly, although typically it's the worst way I would look at data, is perhaps to suggest they look at death certificate data because the fact is the person's death is treated in that. In some fashion, I would end up on probably on this. Anyway, it's a medical complication of that therapy, whether it's schizophrenia or whatever. But I agree, having that listed on the data there, unless you've got the background investigation.
Ken Jones, don't you like how that just lands right back in your lap? How big of a deal or how difficult would it be for Mr. Kramer to be able to get death certificate information, at least with some type of an identifier, perhaps just with a district on it, or would all the identifiers be removed, or would all the identifiers be removed simply because the death is less than 75 years?
Yeah, and it would be confidential, less than the 50-year span. The demographics as far as identifiers would be removed. And again, it depends on, how well the death certificate's completed, listing,
Exactly, but all the identifiers, he would have not even an access to a county, or what would some of the identifiers be? Obviously name and serial number,
you would
Social
have,
Security and all that.
if you were trying to identify down to just a couple of drugs based on the cell size, if it's too small, you won't get it, because that could be identified back to the decedent. They would have to be looked at. If you go into Okeechobee County and you're looking at it, you may have one death, you won't receive that.
Okay.
From that standpoint. It's got to be a cell size large enough not to identify.
And that's something that you folks in Vital Stats would.
We would do. And we have an IRB process. If they're interested in applying for it, they can come to us now and ask for that. They can do a data use request. It goes through the department, the IRB process. He can do that today, and we'll see how we can help him.
And then you folks would actually pull that data, you review that data just so that there wouldn't be an issue.
Correct.
Like a single death in one.
Correct. And we won't give a cell size below a certain thing.
All right, well, I guess my pen pal will continue and will respond to Mr. Kramer that that's probably not something that we will take on as the commission as not being that big of a problem. But we'll probably
Refer them to me if you want to.
Refer them to Department of Health Vital Statistics for those issues.